The auditorium was packed with families, friends, and colleagues celebrating the graduating class of the Phoenix Police Academy. I sat in the third row, smoothing down my modest navy dress, watching my younger brother Marcus prepare to receive his badge. Around me, proud relatives whispered about their sons and daughters becoming officers, detectives, and sergeants. When someone asked what I did for a living, I quietly mentioned I worked as a dispatcher for the county. The dismissive looks that followed told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed my contribution to law enforcement. What none of them knew was that in exactly 47 minutes, my entire world would change forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in suburban Cleveland, Marcus and I had always been close, despite our 4-year age gap. He was the golden child, captain of the football team, valedictorian, full scholarship to Ohio State. I was the quiet older sister who preferred books to parties and spent most of my free time volunteering at the local animal shelter. While Marcus dreamed of becoming a police officer from the age of 12, I stumbled into my career path almost by accident. After graduating with a degree in communications from Kent State, I found myself struggling to find work in my field. The job market was brutal, and after 6 months of rejections, I was desperate. That's when I saw an opening for a 911 dispatcher position with Cuyahoga County. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady work with benefits. I figured it would be temporary, just something to pay the bills while I searched for my real career. The training was intense. 40 hours of classroom instruction followed by months of supervised calls. I learned to type 90 words per minute, while simultaneously listening to panicked voices, gathering crucial information, and dispatching emergency responders. The instructors emphasized that we were the first point of contact in people's darkest moments, and our ability to stay calm could mean the difference between life and death. My first real emergency call came during my 3rd week on the job. A frantic mother called because her 2-year-old had stopped breathing. While I guided her through CPR instructions, I dispatched paramedics to her address. The child survived, and that night I realized I'd found something more than just a job. I'd found my calling. Over the next 5 years, I handled thousands of calls. Domestic violence situations where I had to keep victims on the line while coordinating with officers. Multi-vehicle accidents where I managed resources across 3 different departments. Missing children cases where every second counted. I developed a reputation among the first responders as someone who could remain calm under pressure and somehow always knew exactly which resources to deploy. Marcus, meanwhile, had taken a different path. After college, he joined the Army and served 2 tours in Afghanistan. The experience had matured him, but it had also left him with a burning desire to serve his community back home. When he returned, he immediately applied to police academies across the country. Phoenix accepted him, and he'd thrown himself into the training with the same intensity he'd brought to everything else in his life. The night before his graduation ceremony, we sat in his small apartment near the academy, sharing takeout Chinese food and catching up. He looked sharp in his dress uniform, and I couldn't help but feel proud of how far he'd come. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," he said, setting down his chopsticks. "Are you happy with your job?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you fulfilled? You've been dispatching for 5 years now. Don't you want something more?" I considered his question carefully. The truth was, I loved what I did. Every day brought new challenges, and I'd built relationships with officers, firefighters, and paramedics across the county. I'd been promoted twice and was now a senior dispatcher responsible for training new hires. The work was meaningful, and I was good at it. "I am happy," I said finally. "I know it's not glamorous, but I make a difference." Marcus nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "I just think you're capable of so much more." The next morning, I drove to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport to catch my flight to attend his ceremony. The plane was delayed, and I barely made it to the academy in time. The auditorium was buzzing with excitement as families found their seats. I'd chosen a spot with a good view of the stage, clutching the program that featured Marcus's photo among his graduating class. The ceremony began with the presentation of colors and the national anthem. Chief Rodriguez, a stern-looking woman with silver hair, took the podium to address the families and graduates. She spoke about the commitment required for law enforcement, the sacrifices officers make, and the importance of community support. As the individual recognitions began, I found myself studying the other families around me. To my left sat an elderly couple whose granddaughter was receiving the Academic Achievement Award. Behind me, a group of siblings cheered loudly for their brother. The woman next to me struck up a conversation, asking about my connection to the ceremony. "My brother Marcus is graduating today," I said, pointing to his photo in the program. "How wonderful! And what do you do for work?" "I'm a 911 dispatcher back in Ohio." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, that's nice. Customer service can be so challenging." Before I could correct her misconception, she'd turned to talk to someone else. It was a reaction I'd grown accustomed to over the years. People often didn't understand what dispatching actually involved, viewing it as little more than answering phones. Even within law enforcement circles, there was sometimes an unspoken hierarchy that placed dispatchers at the bottom. Mayans. The ceremony continued with various awards and recognitions. Marcus received a commendation for his performance during training scenarios, and I applauded proudly from my seat. During the intermission, I stepped outside to get some air and check my phone. Marquis pot. That's when I saw the missed calls. 7 missed calls from my supervisor, Janet, along with a text message marked urgent. My heart began to race as I returned the call. "Sarah, thank God you picked up." Janet's voice was strained. "We need you to know that Detective Morrison from the FBI has been trying to reach you. He says it's extremely urgent and related to a case you've been working on." "What case?" I asked, confused. "I haven't been working on any federal cases." He mentioned something about the Patterson kidnapping from 3 months ago, the one where you stayed on the line with the mother for 2 hours. The memory came flooding back. Angela Patterson had called in hysterics when she discovered her 8-year-old daughter Emma missing from their backyard. I'd coordinated with local police, state troopers, and even helped establish roadblocks while keeping Angela calm. The case had been resolved when Emma was found safe at a neighbor's house. She'd simply wandered off and fallen asleep in their garden shed. "But that case was closed," I said. "Emma was found safe. Detective Morrison says there's been a development. He needs to speak with you immediately. He's actually in Phoenix right now and wants to meet with you today." My mind raced. How had a simple missing child case that was resolved quickly become a federal matter? And why would an FBI detective fly to Phoenix to speak with me? Did he say anything else? Only that it's connected to a much larger investigation, and that your role in the Patterson case was more significant than anyone realized at the time. I hung up feeling completely bewildered. The Patterson case had been routine as far as I was concerned. A child had gone missing, I'd done my job coordinating the response, and she'd been found safe. I couldn't imagine what development could have elevated it to federal attention. Back inside the auditorium, I tried to focus on the ceremony, but my mind kept wandering to the mysterious FBI detective. What could he possibly want with me? As Marcus's name was called and he walked across the stage to receive his badge, I applauded enthusiastically. But a part of me was already wondering if my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The ceremony was winding down when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a man in a dark suit, probably in his 40s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "Excuse me, are you Sarah Mitchell?" he asked quietly. I nodded, suddenly feeling very nervous. "I'm Detective Morrison with the FBI. I believe your supervisor told you I'd be contacting you?" The woman sitting next to me glanced over curiously, and I realized that whatever was about to happen, it was going to happen right here, right now, in front of everyone. "Yes, she mentioned you called about the Patterson case." Detective Morrison's expression grew serious. "Ms. Mitchell, I need to speak with you privately as soon as possible. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound incredible. But 3 months ago, when you handled that missing child call, you unknowingly helped us crack open one of the largest human trafficking rings in the Midwest." The words hit me like a physical blow. Human trafficking? But Emma Patterson had been found safe in a neighbor's shed. How could that possibly be connected to human trafficking? "I don't understand," I whispered. "The neighbor whose property Emma was found on has been under federal surveillance for 18 months. When patrol officers responded to search his property, They discovered evidence that led to the arrest of 12 individuals involved in a trafficking operation that spanned 4 states. Your dispatch records, your coordination of the search, and your detailed logs provided crucial evidence that helped us build our case. I felt the blood drain from my face. All around us, families were celebrating their loved ones' achievements, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped in their midst. Ms. Mitchell, Detective Morrison continued, I'm here because the FBI would like to offer you a position as a special agent. Your performance during the Patterson case, combined with your 5 years of experience and your unique skill set, has caught the attention of our behavioral analysis unit. We believe you'd be an exceptional addition to our team. The auditorium around me seemed to fade away. FBI agent? Me? The quiet dispatcher who'd stumbled into her career by accident? I need to think about this, I managed to say. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Of course. But I should mention that we've already done a preliminary background check. Your record is exemplary, and your references from the department are outstanding. Detective Campbell in particular had some remarkable things to say about your abilities. Detective Campbell was someone I'd worked with countless times over the years. He was a gruff veteran who didn't hand out praise lightly. If he'd recommended me to the FBI, it meant more than any formal recognition I'd ever received. The ceremony was ending, and families were beginning to move toward the reception area. I could see Marcus scanning the crowd, looking for me. My little brother, who'd just achieved his dream of becoming a police officer, was about to discover that his just-a-dispatcher sister had apparently been offered a job with the FBI. Detective Morrison, I said, my voice barely audible over the crowd, can you give me until tomorrow to think about this? He handed me his card. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, and I hope you don't mind me calling you that, what you did during that Patterson call saved more lives than you know. The intelligence you gathered, the way you coordinated resources, the detailed reports you filed, all of it contributed to shutting down an operation that had been destroying families for years. As he walked away, I stood frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. Around me, families celebrated their loved ones' achievements, but I felt like I was in a completely different world. The woman who dismissed me as customer service earlier was now chatting with Detective Morrison, clearly curious about our conversation. Marcus appeared at my side, beaming with pride and excitement. Sarah, can you believe it? I'm officially a police officer. I forced a smile and hugged him tightly. I'm so proud of you, Marcus. You worked so hard for this. Who was that guy you were talking to? He looked pretty official. I glanced around at the crowd of families, all of whom seemed to be watching us with renewed interest. In the span of 10 minutes, I'd gone from being dismissed as just a dispatcher to being recruited by the FBI. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just someone from work, I said, not ready to explain the situation until I'd had time to process it myself. But as we walked toward the reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn I never could have anticipated. Tomorrow I would have to decide whether to remain Sarah Mitchell, the dedicated dispatcher from Cleveland, or become something I'd never imagined possible, FBI Special Agent Johnson. The reception hall buzzed with congratulations and clinking glasses, as families mingled with newly minted officers. I moved through the crowd in a daze, Detective Morrison's business card burning a hole in my purse. Marcus was surrounded by his academy classmates, all of them radiating the confidence that comes with achieving a lifelong dream. I grabbed a glass of punch and found a quiet corner, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Sarah Mitchell? I turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching me. She wore a tailored blazer and had the kind of authoritative presence that suggested law enforcement experience. Yes? I'm Captain Helena Vasquez, Phoenix PD. I couldn't help but notice you speaking with Detective Morrison earlier. I've heard quite a bit about your work from colleagues back in Ohio. My surprise must have shown on my face because she smiled warmly. The law enforcement community is smaller than you might think, especially when someone does exceptional work. Your handling of the Riverside Mall shooting incident last year made it into our training materials. The Riverside Mall shooting. I remembered that day vividly. A disgruntled employee had opened fire in the food court, and I'd coordinated response from 7 different agencies while keeping multiple witnesses on the line. The situation had been resolved with minimal casualties, but I'd never imagined it had gained attention outside of Ohio. I had no idea, I admitted. Your ability to remain calm under pressure and coordinate complex multi-agency responses is exactly what we need more of in law enforcement. Have you ever considered moving into a more active role? Before I could respond, Marcus appeared at my side, still glowing with excitement. Sarah, there you are. I want you to meet Lieutenant Torres. He's going to be my training officer. Lieutenant Torres was a compact man with graying temples and intelligent eyes. He shook my hand firmly. Your brother tells me you're a dispatcher back in Cleveland. That's demanding work. It can be, I said, grateful for his respectful tone. I started as a dispatcher myself, 23 years ago. Best training I ever got for understanding how emergency response really works. You learn to see the big picture in ways that beat cops sometimes miss. Captain Vasquez nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I was telling Ms. Mitchell. Dispatchers who transition to field work often become exceptional investigators because they understand systems and coordination. The conversation continued, but my mind kept drifting to Detective Morrison's offer. FBI Special Agent Johnson. The name felt foreign, impossible. I'd spent 5 years building a career as Sarah Mitchell, the reliable dispatcher. Could I really become someone entirely different? After another hour of small talk and congratulations, Marcus and I finally left the reception. He was staying at a hotel near the academy, and I was flying back to Cleveland early the next morning. We decided to grab dinner at a quiet restaurant where we could actually talk. So, Marcus said once we'd ordered, are you going to tell me what's really going on? That conversation with the FBI guy didn't look like routine work business. I'd been dreading this moment. Marcus had always been perceptive, and lying to him felt wrong. But I also wasn't sure I was ready to discuss something I hadn't fully processed myself. It's complicated, I said finally. Try me. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The Patterson case, the human trafficking connection, Detective Morrison's offer, and my complete bewilderment about what it all meant. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Jesus, Sarah, he said when I finished. The FBI wants to recruit you? I know it sounds crazy. It sounds amazing. This is exactly what I was talking about last night. You're capable of so much more than you realize. But I like what I do. I'm good at it. You're exceptional at it. That's why they want you. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision settling between us. Finally, Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. Can I tell you something? During our scenario training at the academy, they had us work with dispatchers on complex emergency simulations. Most of the cadets struggled with the coordination aspects. They couldn't see beyond their immediate assignment. But the instructors kept using examples of dispatchers who could manage multiple moving pieces simultaneously, anticipate resource needs, and adapt to changing circumstances. They called it, strategic thinking under pressure. Your point? My point is that what you do naturally, seeing the big picture, coordinating resources, staying calm when everything's falling apart, those are exactly the skills the FBI values most. You've been training for this job for 5 years without even knowing it. That night, alone in my hotel room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the Patterson case, trying to remember details that might have seemed insignificant at the time. Angela Patterson had been frantic when she called, but there had been something else in her voice. A specific kind of fear that went beyond a missing child. I pulled out my laptop and accessed the dispatch database remotely. The Patterson case file was extensive. 2 hours of recorded calls, detailed logs of resource deployment, and follow-up reports. I documented everything meticulously, as always, but reading through it now, with Detective Morrison's revelation in mind, I began to see patterns I'd missed. Angela had mentioned that Emma had been playing in their backyard, which backed up to the Hendricks property, but she'd also mentioned seeing strange cars coming and going from the neighbor's house at odd hours. At the time, I'd noted it as potentially relevant information for the search, but I hadn't connected it to anything larger. The responding officers had found Emma in the Hendricks garden shed, but their report mentioned discovering, quote, unusual modifications to the basement of the main house. Again, I'd filed this information without understanding its significance. Most telling was a detail I'd completely forgotten until now. During the search, Angela had mentioned that Emma had been asking questions about the sad people she'd seen through the fence. I'd assumed she meant emotional visitors, but now I wondered if an 8-year-old had witnessed something far more sinister. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Mitchell, this is Detective Morrison. I know you're considering our offer. If you have questions, I'm available to talk. Sometimes it helps to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'd like to know more about the Patterson case. What exactly did my dispatch work uncover? His response came quickly. Are you free for breakfast tomorrow before your flight? There's a lot more to this story, and I think you deserve to know the full impact of your work. The next morning, I met Detective Morrison at a small cafe near the airport. He looked tired, but determined as he spread several files across our table. Before we begin, he said, I want you to understand that what I'm about to show you is classified information. I'm sharing it because you were instrumental in this investigation, and because we believe you have the potential to help us solve similar cases in the future. He opened the first file, revealing surveillance photos of the Hendricks property. Robert Hendricks wasn't just a neighbor. He was a middleman in a trafficking operation that moved children across state lines. His property was a way station, a place where victims were temporarily housed before being transported to other locations. My stomach lurched. But Emma was found safe. Emma was never the real target. Her disappearance was accidental. She wandered onto the property and fell asleep in the shed. But when officers responded to search for her, they discovered evidence of the trafficking operation. Hidden cameras, modified basement rooms, documents that led us to connections in 4 other states. He opened another file, this one containing arrest records and mugshots. Your dispatch logs documented every detail of the response. The timeline you created, the resources you coordinated, the systematic search pattern you established, all of it became crucial evidence in our case. I was just doing my job. You were doing much more than that. Look at this. He pulled out a transcript of one of my calls with Angela Patterson. Here, you asked her about unusual activity in the neighborhood. You documented her observations about strange cars and odd visitors. Most dispatchers would have focused solely on the missing child, but you recognized that context might be important. I studied the transcript, remembering how Angela's voice had changed when she talked about the neighbors. There had been something fearful in her tone that had made me probe deeper. When officers searched the Hendricks property, they used your dispatch notes to identify evidence they might have otherwise missed. Your documentation of Emma's comments about sad people led them to check the basement more thoroughly. Your coordination of the perimeter search established a timeline that proved crucial in our larger investigation. Detective Morrison leaned back in his chair. Sarah, in 5 years of dispatching, you've handled approximately 15,000 emergency calls. Your accuracy rate is 98%, your response time averages are in the top 5% nationally, and you've received commendations from every agency you've worked with. But more importantly, you have an intuitive understanding of how criminal behavior intersects with emergency response patterns. What do you mean? You see connections that others miss. The domestic violence calls reveal drug operations. The missing persons reports that uncover human trafficking. The routine burglary calls that expose organized crime networks. It's a rare skill, and it's exactly what we need in the Bureau. He pulled out one final document, an official FBI recruitment letter with my name on it. This isn't just about the Patterson case. We've been monitoring your work for over a year, Sarah. Every major case you've handled has demonstrated the kind of analytical thinking and coordination skills that make exceptional federal agents. I stared at the letter, my mind reeling. A year? You've been watching me for a year? Not watching, reviewing. Your supervisor, Janet, has been in contact with our recruitment division. She recommended you for our civilian analyst program 18 months ago, but we wanted to see more of your field work before making an offer. Janet recommended me? She never said anything. She was waiting for the right opportunity. The Patterson case provided that opportunity, but honestly, we would have approached you soon anyway. Your work speaks for itself. I looked around the cafe, suddenly aware that other customers were beginning to arrive for the morning rush. In less than an hour, I would be on a plane back to Cleveland, back to my quiet life as a dispatcher. But sitting at this table, surrounded by evidence of crimes I'd helped solve without even knowing it, I felt something shifting inside me. If I were to accept this offer, I said slowly, what would training involve? Detective Morrison smiled. Quantico. 20 weeks of intensive training covering everything from criminal psychology to tactical operations. You'd learn surveillance techniques, interview strategies, evidence analysis, and firearms training. But honestly, the hardest part for most recruits is learning to think systematically about criminal behavior. And you already do that naturally. And after training, you'd be assigned to a field office, probably Cleveland initially since you know the area. You'd work complex cases involving organized crime, public corruption, terrorism, and yes, human trafficking. The cases that require someone who can see the bigger picture and coordinate multiple investigative threads. I thought about my conversation with Marcus the night before, about Captain Vasquez's comments at the reception, about Lieutenant Torres' respect for dispatchers who understood systems. Maybe they were all seeing something I'd been too close to my work to recognize. Detective Morrison, I said, I need to ask you something honestly. Am I really qualified for this, or are you just desperate for recruits? He laughed, but not unkindly. Sarah, the FBI receives over 100,000 applications per year. We accept fewer than 5%. We don't make offers to people we're not absolutely confident will succeed. Your combination of technical skills, analytical thinking, and real-world experience is exactly what we're looking for. He gathered the files and stood up. I know this is a lot to process. Take some time to think about it. But I want you to know that whether you accept or not, you've already made a significant contribution to law enforcement. The Patterson case led to the rescue of 17 children and the arrest of a trafficking network that had been operating for 3 years. 17 children. I sat in stunned silence as he walked away, leaving me alone with the weight of that number. 17 children whose lives had been changed because I'd done my job thoroughly and asked the right questions. My phone buzzed with a boarding announcement. It was time to go home, but as I gathered my things, I realized I wasn't the same person who had flown to Phoenix 2 days ago. Something fundamental had shifted, and there was no going back to seeing myself as just a dispatcher. The question now was whether I was brave enough to become Special Agent Johnson. The flight back to Cleveland gave me 3 hours of uninterrupted time to process everything that had happened. I stared out the window at the clouds below, Detective Morrison's words echoing in my mind. 17 children. A trafficking network spanning 4 states. All because I'd asked the right questions during what seemed like a routine missing child call. When I landed at Hopkins International Airport, Janet was waiting for me at baggage claim. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her car keys and scanning the crowd anxiously. The moment she saw me, her face broke into a mixture of relief and anticipation. "How did it go?" she asked as we walked to her car. "You knew, didn't you? About the FBI watching my work?" Janet sighed deeply. "I recommended you for their civilian analyst program almost 2 years ago. I've been fielding calls from their recruitment division ever since. Sarah, you have no idea how exceptional your work really is." We drove through the familiar streets of Cleveland in relative silence. The city looked different somehow. Smaller, more constrained than I remembered. After seeing the scope of what the FBI dealt with, my hometown felt like a fishbowl. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked finally. "Because I knew you'd overthink it. You've always underestimated yourself, Sarah. You see yourself as just another dispatcher, but everyone else sees someone extraordinary." "Like who?" "Like Detective Rodriguez from Narcotics. Remember the warehouse raid last month? He specifically requested that you handle the dispatch coordination because he said you were the only one who could manage that many moving parts without losing track of officer safety." I remembered that night vividly, 3 simultaneous raids across the city, requiring coordination between SWAT, narcotics, patrol units, and federal agents. It had been chaos for 2 hours, but we pulled it off without any injuries. Or Lieutenant Barnes from the bomb squad, Janet continued. She told me that your ability to keep witnesses calm during explosive device calls has saved more lives than anyone realizes. You don't just dispatch resources, you become a lifeline for people in their worst moments. We pulled into the parking lot of the dispatch center, where I'd worked for 5 years. The building looked mundane from the outside, a generic government structure that could have housed any number of municipal departments. But walking through those doors, I felt the weight of every call I'd handled, every crisis I'd helped resolve. Inside, the night shift was in full swing. The main dispatch floor hummed with activity as operators fielded calls and coordinated responses across the county. I knew every voice, every protocol, every piece of equipment in that room. It had been my world for so long that imagining myself anywhere else felt impossible. "Sarah," called out Michelle, one of the newer dispatchers I'd trained. "How was your brother's ceremony?" "Good," I said, not ready to explain the rest. "He looked great in his uniform." "That's so exciting. I bet you're proud." I was proud, but I was also grappling with the realization that Marcus and I might soon be working in the same field in ways I'd never imagined. The little brother I'd watched graduate from the police academy might end up working cases that I'd help coordinate from the federal level. Janet led me to her office and closed the door. "I need to tell you something else. The I wasn't the only agency that's been paying attention to your work." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "The State Attorney General's office has been reviewing your documentation on the Riverside Mall shooting. They want to use your coordination protocols as a model for active shooter response training statewide." "What does that mean?" "It means they want to hire you as a consultant to develop training programs for dispatchers across Ohio. It's a significant opportunity, and it would mean a substantial pay increase." I stared at the folder, feeling overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, I'd been just another dispatcher attending her brother's graduation. Now I had job offers from both the FBI and the State Attorney General's office. "Janet, I need to ask you something honestly. Do you think I should take the FBI offer?" She was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Sarah, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've trained dozens of dispatchers, and I've worked with hundreds of officers, detectives, and federal agents. In all that time, I've never seen anyone with your combination of technical skills, analytical thinking, and emotional intelligence. But I also know that staying here, in this job, you'll continue to make a difference. The question is whether you want to make a difference for Cuyahoga County or for the entire country." That night, I drove to my apartment in a daze. The familiar route through my neighborhood felt strange, as if I was seeing it for the first time. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom place near the university, filled with books and the kind of comfortable furniture that suggested permanence. Everything in my life had been built around the assumption that I would stay in Cleveland, continue dispatching, and slowly work my way up through the ranks. I called my parents in Florida, where they'd retired 2 years earlier. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright with curiosity about Marcus's ceremony. "How was it, sweetheart? Did he look handsome in his uniform?" "He looked great, Mom. Really professional." "And how are you doing? You sound tired." I hadn't planned to tell them about the FBI offer, but something in my mother's voice made me want to share the burden of this decision. I found myself explaining the entire situation. The Patterson case, Detective Morrison's revelation, the job offer that had completely upended my understanding of my own capabilities. "Oh my goodness," my mother said when I finished. "Sarah, this is incredible. The FBI. I know it sounds impressive, but I'm scared, Mom. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail?" "Honey, you've never failed at anything you've put your mind to. Remember when you decided to learn Spanish in college? You were convinced you'd never master it, but you ended up with a minor in the subject. That's different." "Is it? You saw a challenge, you worked hard, and you succeeded. This is the same thing, just bigger." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at Detective Morrison's business card. The weight of the decision felt enormous. If I accepted the FBI offer, I would leave behind everything familiar: my job, my city, my identity as Sarah Mitchell, the dispatcher. But if I turned it down, would I spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been? Auxine cod. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Marcus. Auxine. Hey, how was your flight? Long. How are you feeling about starting your new job? Nervous, but excited. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. About the FBI offer. And? I think you should take it. Marcus, I don't know if I'm ready for something that big. Sarah, do you remember when I was deployed in Afghanistan? I was terrified every single day. Not of dying, but of letting my unit down. Of not being good enough when it mattered most. But you were good enough. You earned a Bronze Star. I earned that Bronze Star because I had excellent training and because I trusted my instincts. Sarah, you've been training for this job for 5 years. You have the skills, the experience, and the instincts. The only thing you're missing is the confidence to believe in yourself. What if I hate it? What if I realize I made a mistake? Then you'll figure it out. But what if you love it? What if you discover that you're capable of things you never imagined? After Marcus hung up, I found myself thinking about Emma Patterson, an 8-year-old girl whose accidental disappearance had led to the rescue of 17 other children. None of us had known the full scope of what was happening when I took that first frantic call from her mother. But by doing my job thoroughly, by asking the right questions and documenting everything carefully, I'd helped uncover something much larger than anyone had realized. That's when it hit me. I'd been thinking about the FBI offer as a radical departure from my current work, but it wasn't. It was an evolution. All the skills I'd developed as a dispatcher, the ability to stay calm under pressure, to coordinate multiple resources, to see patterns that others missed. These were exactly what federal law enforcement needed. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in days. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, and drove to the dispatch center. But instead of going to my usual workstation, I went straight to Janet's office. I need to make a phone call, I said, holding up Detective Morrison's card. Janet smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I dialed the number, my hands surprisingly steady. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. Morrison here. Detective Morrison, this is Sarah Mitchell. I've made my decision about your offer. I'm listening. I accept. When do I start? There was a pause, and then I heard the genuine warmth in his voice. Congratulations, Agent Johnson. Welcome to the FBI. Agent Johnson. The name still felt foreign, but for the first time, it also felt possible. There's a lot of paperwork to complete, he continued, and you'll need to report to Quantico for training in 6 weeks. But first, I want to invite you to spend a few days with our Cleveland field office. I think you'll be surprised by how much your local knowledge will contribute to our ongoing investigations. What do you mean? We've been tracking several cases that originated in your dispatch area. Your familiarity with the region, combined with your analytical skills, could help us connect some dots that we've been missing. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange combination of terror and exhilaration. In 6 weeks, I would leave Cleveland for Quantico, Virginia, to begin training as an FBI agent. But first, I had cases to work, knowledge to share, and a transition to navigate. Janet knocked on her office door. So I'm going to need to give my notice. Already done. I submitted your resignation letter this morning, effective in 6 weeks. I also recommended Michelle to take over your training responsibilities. You were that confident I'd accept? I was that confident that you'd eventually realize what everyone else already knows. You're meant for bigger things than this dispatch center can offer. Walking back through the dispatch floor, I looked at each workstation with new eyes. These people, my colleagues, my friends, my second family, had been part of my journey to this moment. They'd supported me, learned from me, and helped me develop the skills that had caught the FBI's attention. Michelle, I called out, can you come here for a minute? She looked up from her console, curious. What's up? I have some news that's going to sound completely insane. As I began to explain my situation to the team, I realized that the woman who had walked into this building 5 years ago, uncertain, underqualified, and just grateful for steady work, was gone. In her place was someone who had learned to trust her instincts, to see patterns that others missed, and to remain calm when everything around her was falling apart. Someone who was ready to become Special Agent Johnson. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been building through thousands of calls, hundreds of emergencies, and countless moments when I'd had to make split-second decisions that affected other people's lives. The FBI hadn't created these skills. They'd simply recognized what had been developing all along. As I looked around the dispatch center one last time before heading home, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. This place had been my training ground, my proving ground, and my launching pad. Everything I would become as an FBI agent would be built on the foundation I'd established here. The scared young woman who had stumbled into dispatching because she couldn't find work in her field was about to become a federal agent. And for the first time since Detective Morrison had approached me at Marcus's ceremony, that transformation felt not just possible, but inevitable. 6 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the William H. Webster FBI building at Quantico, Virginia, clutching a duffel bag and feeling like an imposter. The other new agent trainees around me looked exactly like what I'd expected FBI recruits to look like. Former military officers with perfect posture, ex-police detectives with confident swagger, and fresh-faced college graduates who'd been planning careers in federal law enforcement since high school. Then there was me, Sarah Mitchell from Cleveland, who'd stumbled into her career by accident and spent 5 years answering emergency calls. Sarah Johnson? I turned to see a woman in her 30s with short auburn hair and intense green eyes. She wore the standard FBI polo shirt and khakis that marked her as an instructor. Yes, that's me. I'm Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Chen. I'll be your counselor during training. Welcome to Quantico. As she led me through the sprawling complex, Agent Chen explained the layout of the academy. Dormitories, classrooms, the famous obstacle course, shooting ranges, and the mock town where trainees practiced real-world scenarios. The scale of it was overwhelming. I have to be honest, Agent Chen said as we walked, your file is unusual. Most of our recruits come from traditional law enforcement or military backgrounds. But Detective Morrison spoke very highly of your analytical capabilities. I'm starting to wonder if he oversold my qualifications. Agent Chen stopped walking and turned to face me. Sarah, can I call you Sarah? I've been training FBI agents for 8 years. Trust me when I say that the Bureau doesn't make mistakes when it comes to recruitment. You're here because you have something we need. My dormitory room was spartanly furnished but functional. I unpacked my few belongings, hung up the business suits I'd bought specifically for training, and tried to calm my nerves. My roommate was Lisa Hartwell, a former Army intelligence officer from Texas, who immediately struck me as someone who could handle anything. So what's your background? Lisa asked as she organized her already perfectly arranged desk. I was a 911 dispatcher in Cleveland for 5 years. Lisa paused in her organizing. Really? That's interesting. We had a case study in my intelligence training about a dispatcher who helped break up a major trafficking ring. Happened in Ohio, I think. My stomach dropped. The Patterson case? You know about it? I was the dispatcher. Lisa stared at me for a moment, then broke into a wide grin. Holy shit, you're famous. That case is required reading in 6 federal training programs. You coordinated a response that led to one of the biggest trafficking busts in Midwest history. Famous. I'd never thought of myself that way, but apparently my work had reached farther than I'd ever imagined. The first week of training was brutal. Physical fitness at dawn, firearms instruction, legal procedures, criminal psychology, and investigation techniques. I struggled with the physical demands more than some of my classmates, but I found myself excelling in areas I hadn't expected. During a complex case study involving a multi-state kidnapping, I was able to identify patterns in the perpetrator's movement that other trainees had missed. When we practiced coordinating surveillance operations, my experience managing multiple resources simultaneously made me a natural team leader. Johnson, good work on the surveillance exercise, said Agent Martinez, our tactical operations instructor. Your ability to track multiple moving parts while maintaining operational security is exactly what we need in the field. But it was during our behavioral analysis training that I truly found my footing. Dr. Patricia Williamson, a veteran FBI profiler, presented us with a cold case involving a series of home invasions across 3 states. The local police had been unable to establish connections between the crimes. As she outlined the evidence, something clicked in my mind. The timing of the invasions, the specific items stolen, the geographic pattern. It reminded me of a series of burglary calls I'd handled in Cleveland 2 years earlier. Dr. Williamson, I said, raising my hand, can I ask about the timing of these incidents? What about it? They all occurred between 2 and 4 a.m. on weeknights. In my experience dispatching burglary calls, that timing usually indicates either someone with shift work who knows when neighborhoods are quietest, or someone who's casing properties during routine patrol gaps. Dr. Williamson nodded approvingly. Go on. The items stolen, electronics, small appliances, jewelry, they're all easily transportable and quickly convertible to cash. But the pattern suggests the perpetrator isn't local to any of the crime scenes. He's moving systematically, which means he either has legitimate reasons to travel between these areas, or he's following some kind of route. What kind of route? I walked to the map on the wall, studying the marked locations. Look at the interstate connections. Every crime scene is within 5 miles of I-70 or I-75. And the timing between incidents suggests someone who's covering a significant distance but needs to maintain a schedule. Dr. Williamson was taking notes now. What's your theory? Truck driver. Someone with legitimate reasons to be in all these areas, access to transportation for moving stolen goods, and intimate knowledge of police patrol patterns from years of night driving. The classroom was silent as Dr. Williamson considered my analysis. Finally, she smiled. Johnson, you just solved a case that stumped 3 state police departments. The perpetrator was indeed a long-haul trucker who was arrested 6 months after these incidents for unrelated charges. Your assessment is remarkably accurate. Word of my performance in behavioral analysis spread quickly through the training cohort. Suddenly, other trainees were seeking me out for study groups and case review sessions. I found myself in the unexpected position of being considered an expert in criminal pattern recognition. Sarah, Lisa said one evening as we reviewed our notes from that day's classes, do you realize how unusual your background makes you? Most of us learned about criminal behavior from textbooks. You learned it from handling thousands of real emergencies. She was right. While my classmates studied theoretical frameworks for understanding criminal psychology, I'd spent 5 years listening to people in crisis, managing chaotic situations, and coordinating responses to every type of emergency imaginable. I didn't know academic terminology for what I observed, but I understood human behavior under extreme stress in ways that couldn't be taught in a classroom. Midway through our training, we received a visit from Deputy Director Catherine Walsh, one of the highest-ranking officials in the FBI. She addressed our class about the changing nature of federal law enforcement and the evolving challenges facing the Bureau. The criminals we pursue today are more sophisticated than ever before, she said. They operate across jurisdictions, use technology to their advantage, and exploit gaps in traditional law enforcement coordination. We need agents who can think systematically, adapt quickly, and see connections that others miss. After her presentation, she asked to speak with me privately. Agent Johnson, I've been following your progress here at Quantico. Your instructors tell me you have an exceptional ability to identify patterns in criminal behavior. Thank you, ma'am. I'm particularly interested in your background as a dispatcher. That perspective, understanding how crimes unfold from the emergency response side, is invaluable to our work. She handed me a folder marked classified. I'd like you to review this case during your free time. It's an active investigation involving a series of crimes across multiple states. Your pattern recognition skills might help us identify connections we've missed. That night, I opened the folder in the privacy of my dorm room. The case involved a series of seemingly unrelated incidents: financial fraud in Michigan, identity theft in Illinois, and cybercrimes in Indiana. On the surface, they appeared to be completely separate investigations handled by different field offices. But as I studied the timelines, victim profiles, and evidence patterns, I began to see similarities. The crimes were sophisticated, targeting specific demographics, and the perpetrators seemed to have detailed knowledge of law enforcement procedures. Most importantly, each incident had involved emergency services in some capacity: false 911 calls, spoofed emergency notifications, or fraudulent reports designed to distract law enforcement. I spent 3 days analyzing the evidence, cross-referencing it with my experience handling different types of emergency calls. Finally, I drafted a detailed report outlining my theory. These weren't separate criminal operations, but components of a single, highly organized network that was using emergency services as both a cover and a tool for their crimes. When I submitted my analysis to Deputy Director Walsh, I expected it to disappear into the vast bureaucracy of federal law enforcement. Instead, she called me to her office 2 days later. "Agent Johnson, your analysis of the cross-jurisdictional case is remarkable. You've identified connections that 3 separate investigative teams missed." "Thank you, ma'am." "More than that, your recommendations for coordinating the investigation have already been implemented. We've established a joint task force, and preliminary evidence suggests you're absolutely right about this being a single network." She leaned back in her chair, studying me intently. "I want to discuss your assignment after graduation. Typically, new agents are assigned to field offices based on operational needs and geographic preferences. But I'd like to make you a different offer." "What kind of offer?" "I want you to join our behavioral analysis unit at Quantico. You'd work on complex cases involving organized crime, terrorism, and multi-jurisdictional investigations. Your unique background and analytical skills would be invaluable to our profiling teams." The Behavioral Analysis Unit. I'd heard other trainees talking about it in reverent tones. The elite division that handled the Bureau's most challenging cases. It was the kind of assignment that typically went to agents with years of field experience, not fresh graduates. "Ma'am, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for something that's specialized." "Agent Johnson, you've been handling specialized cases for 5 years. You just didn't realize it at the time." Graduation day arrived with a mixture of pride and nervousness. My parents flew in from Florida, and Marcus managed to get leave from his new position with the Phoenix Police Department. As I walked across the stage to receive my badge and credentials, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 2 months earlier, I'd been Sarah Mitchell, the dispatcher who'd attended her brother's police academy graduation feeling overlooked and undervalued. Now I was Special Agent Sarah Johnson, assigned to one of the most prestigious units in federal law enforcement. After the ceremony, my family joined me for dinner at a restaurant near Quantico. Marcus looked proud but also slightly bewildered by the transformation his sister had undergone. "So let me get this straight," he said. "You're going to be profiling serial killers and international criminals?" "Among other things, yes." "The sister, who used to be afraid of horror movies, is going to hunt down the worst criminals in the country?" "I was never afraid of horror movies. I just thought they were poorly written." My mother laughed. "That sounds more like the Sarah we know." As we talked, I reflected on how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. I was still the person who preferred books to parties, who volunteered at animal shelters, and who believed in helping people during their worst moments. But now I understood that those qualities weren't limitations. They were exactly what made me effective in this work. "Sarah," my father said, "I have to ask, are you happy? This is such a dramatic change from the life you had in Cleveland." I considered his question carefully. "I'm terrified most of the time," I admitted. "But yes, I'm happy. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." After my family left, I walked around the Quantico campus one last time as a trainee. Tomorrow I would report to the Behavioral Analysis Unit as a full agent. I would work cases that spanned multiple states and involved criminals whose sophistication far exceeded anything I'd encountered as a dispatcher. But I wouldn't be starting from scratch. Every emergency call I'd handled, every crisis I'd managed, every pattern I'd learned to recognize, all of it had been preparation for this moment. The scared young woman who'd taken a dispatcher job because she couldn't find anything else had become someone who could see connections that others missed, remain calm under pressure, and coordinate complex investigations involving multiple agencies. As I packed my belongings for the move to my new apartment near Quantico, I found Detective Morrison's original business card at the bottom of my bag. On impulse, I called his number. Morrison here. Detective Morrison, this is Sarah Johnson. I just wanted to thank you. Agent Johnson, congratulations on your graduation. How did training go? Better than I expected. I've been assigned to the Behavioral Analysis Unit. There was a pause, then a low whistle. The BAU? That's incredible, Sarah. That's where the Bureau sends their best analysts. I still can't quite believe it's real. Believe it. And remember, you didn't become qualified for this job at Quantico. You became qualified for it during 5 years of exceptional work in Cleveland. The FBI just helped you recognize what you were already capable of. After we hung up, I thought about the Patterson case one more time. Emma Patterson, the 8-year-old whose accidental disappearance had changed everything. By now, she was probably back to playing in her backyard, completely unaware that her brief adventure had led to the rescue of 17 other children, and launched a dispatcher's transformation into a federal agent. Tomorrow, I would begin work on cases involving criminals whose sophistication and reach dwarfed anything I'd encountered before. I would profile suspects, coordinate multi-state investigations, and help solve crimes that local law enforcement couldn't handle alone. But tonight, I was simply Sarah, the woman who'd learned that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments. Who'd discovered that being underestimated could be an advantage, that quiet competence spoke louder than flashy credentials, and that the skills needed to excel in federal law enforcement could be developed in the most unexpected places. The next morning, I walked into the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. for the first time as Special Agent Johnson. The security guard checked my credentials and directed me to the Behavioral Analysis Unit on the 6th floor. As the elevator rose, I thought about Marcus's graduation ceremony, where this journey had begun. I'd sat in that auditorium feeling like an outsider, dismissed as just a dispatcher by people who didn't understand what the job really entailed. Now, as the elevator doors opened and I stepped into my new life as an FBI agent, I realized that every dismissive comment, every moment of feeling overlooked, and every challenge I'd faced had been necessary parts of my journey. They'd taught me to rely on my abilities rather than external validation, to find confidence in competence rather than titles, and to understand that true expertise comes from doing the work, not talking about it. The receptionist smiled as I approached her desk. You must be Agent Johnson. Welcome to the BAU. Dr. Williamson is waiting for you in Conference Room B. As I walked down the hallway toward my first official assignment as a federal agent, I passed a wall of photos showing the unit's most significant cases. Organized crime networks dismantled, serial killers captured, terrorist plots foiled, all solved by teams of agents who'd learned to see patterns that others missed. Soon I would be part of that tradition. The dispatcher who'd started her career by accident was about to begin hunting down the most dangerous criminals in the country. And for the first time since Detective Morrison had approached me at Marcus's ceremony, I wasn't just ready for the challenge. I was eager for it. Dr. Williamson greeted me at the conference room door with a warm smile and a stack of case files. Agent Johnson, perfect timing. We have a situation developing that requires your particular expertise. The conference room was equipped with state-of-the-art technology, multiple screens displaying maps, databases, and real-time intelligence feeds. 3 other agents were already seated around the table, their expressions serious as they reviewed documents. Agents, I'd like you to meet Sarah Johnson, our newest team member. Agent Johnson, this is Agent David Chen from our Cybercrimes Division, Agent Maria Santos, who specializes in organized crime, and Agent Robert Kim, our financial crimes expert. As I took my seat, Agent Santos slid a tablet across the table. We've been tracking a sophisticated operation that's been hitting emergency dispatch centers across the Midwest. They're infiltrating 911 systems, intercepting calls, and using the information to coordinate criminal activities. My blood ran cold. Someone was targeting dispatcher operations. My former world was under attack. The pattern started 3 weeks ago in Detroit, Agent Chen continued. Hackers gained access to their dispatch system during a shift change. While they were inside, several high-value residential burglaries occurred in neighborhoods where homeowners had recently called 911 for medical emergencies. They're using emergency calls to identify vulnerable targets, I said, the implications immediately clear. Medical emergencies often mean elderly residents or people with medical conditions who might have valuable medications. The hackers would know exactly when those homes were temporarily unoccupied. Dr. Williamson nodded approvingly. That's exactly what we suspect. But it gets worse. Yesterday, we intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to target a major metropolitan dispatch center during a significant event. Agent Kim pulled up a map on the main screen. Cleveland is hosting the Great Lakes Economic Summit next week. 15 heads of state, hundreds of corporate executives, and massive coordination between federal, state, and local agencies. If someone compromised their dispatch system during the summit, it would be chaos, I finished. Emergency responders wouldn't know which calls were real and which were diversions. They could coordinate assassinations, terrorist attacks, or massive thefts, while first responders were chasing false alarms. Our intelligence suggests the attack is planned for Thursday, the second day of the summit. That's when the most high-profile meetings are scheduled, Agent Santos said. Dr. Williamson leaned forward. Agent Johnson, we need someone who understands dispatch operations from the inside. How would you infiltrate a 911 center if you were planning this type of attack? I closed my eyes, thinking through the vulnerabilities I'd observed during my 5 years in Cleveland. Shift changes are the most vulnerable time. That's when attention is divided and protocols are most likely to be overlooked. But for something this sophisticated, they'd need inside knowledge. What kind of inside knowledge? System passwords, shift schedules, protocol codes, and most importantly, the communication frequencies used by different agencies. You can't just hack into a dispatch center from the outside. The security is too robust. You need someone on the inside or access to very specific technical information. Agent Chen was taking notes rapidly. Our cyber forensics team found evidence that the Detroit infiltration involved compromised employee credentials. Someone either turned an insider or obtained legitimate access codes. Have you contacted the Cleveland Dispatch Center? I asked. We planned to, but we weren't sure how to approach it without tipping off potential insider threats, Dr. Williamson said. That's where you come in. You know the people, the procedures, and the security protocols. Can you help us identify vulnerabilities without alerting anyone who might be working with the criminals? The request felt surreal. 6 weeks ago, I'd been working alongside these people every day. Now I was being asked to investigate them for potential treason. I can help, I said carefully, but I need to understand something first. Are we talking about voluntary cooperation with criminals? Or could someone be coerced or blackmailed into providing access? What makes you ask that? Agent Santos inquired. Dispatchers handle incredibly sensitive information every day. Family emergencies, domestic violence situations, financial crises. We hear it all. If someone wanted to blackmail a dispatcher, they'd have plenty of material to work with. Dr. Williamson exchanged glances with the other agents. That's an angle we hadn't fully considered. Agent Johnson, how quickly can you review personnel files and identify potential vulnerabilities? Give me access to the files and 24 hours. I know these people personally, their backgrounds, their family situations, their financial pressures. If someone is being coerced or compromised, I'll be able to identify likely candidates. The next 18 hours were among the most intense of my life. I reviewed personnel files for every employee who had access to critical dispatch systems, cross-referencing them with financial records, family situations, and recent behavioral changes. The work was painstaking and emotionally difficult. These weren't just potential security threats. They were my former colleagues and friends. 3 names emerged as potential concerns. Jennifer Walsh, a newer dispatcher who'd been struggling with her mother's expensive cancer treatments. David Patel, whose younger brother had recently been arrested on drug charges. And most troubling, Tom Bradley, a 20-year veteran who'd been acting strangely in the weeks before I left for Quantico. I called Dr. Williamson at 3 a.m. with my findings. I've identified 3 potential vulnerabilities, but I need to talk to someone at the center directly to get more current information. Absolutely not. We can't risk exposing the investigation. Then we need surveillance on all 3 individuals immediately. And Dr. Williamson, If this attack is planned for Thursday, we're running out of time. Tuesday morning brought a breakthrough. Agent Chen's cyber team intercepted encrypted communications that confirmed our worst fears. The attack on Cleveland's dispatch center was scheduled for Thursday afternoon during the Economic Summit's security briefing session. They're planning to flood the system with false emergency calls while simultaneously deploying malware that will crash backup systems, Agent Chen reported. During the chaos, they'll execute a coordinated attack on the summit venue. Dr. Williamson turned to me. Agent Johnson, we need you in Cleveland. You're the only one who can help us navigate this situation without causing panic or alerting potential inside threats. 12 hours later, I was on a plane back to Cleveland, carrying federal credentials that would have seemed impossible just 2 months earlier. As the city came into view below, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and determination. I was returning home, but as a completely different person, with a vastly different mission. Agent Santos met me at the airport. We've established a command post at the federal building downtown. Local law enforcement has been briefed on a potential terrorist threat, but they don't know about the dispatch center infiltration. What's our strategy? You're going to visit your former workplace under the cover of a friendly return visit. While you're there, you'll assess security, identify any unusual behavior, and if possible, determine which of your 3 suspects might be compromised. The plan was risky, but it was our best option for gathering intelligence without triggering the very attack we were trying to prevent. Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the Cuyahoga County Emergency Dispatch Center for the first time since leaving for Quantico. The familiar sounds and smells hit me immediately. The constant hum of radio chatter, the soft clicking of keyboards, the lingering aroma of too much coffee and too little sleep. "Sarah!" Michelle rushed over to greet me, her face bright with excitement. "Oh my God, you look so official in that suit. How's FBI training?" "Challenging, but amazing," I said, forcing a casual tone while my eyes scanned the room for my 3 suspects. I was in town for a briefing and thought I'd stop by to see everyone. As I made my rounds, greeting old colleagues and catching up on office gossip, I carefully observed each of my potential suspects. Jennifer Walsh looked exhausted and kept checking her phone nervously. David Patel seemed jumpy, startling every time his radio crackled. But it was Tom Bradley's behavior that raised the biggest red flags. Tom, normally gregarious and friendly, barely acknowledged my presence. When I approached his workstation, he quickly minimized several windows on his computer screen and avoided eye contact. "Hey Tom, how's everything going?" Fine. Busy day, you know how it is." But his hands were shaking slightly, and I noticed a new expensive watch on his wrist. Unusual for someone on a dispatcher's salary. As I prepared to leave, I lingered near Tom's station until he stepped away for a bathroom break. A quick glance at his computer screen revealed multiple encrypted messaging applications running in the background. Software that definitely wasn't part of standard dispatch operations. I had my inside threat. The question now was whether we could stop the attack without compromising Tom or triggering the very chaos we were trying to prevent. With less than 24 hours before the summit's critical security briefing, every decision would be crucial. As I walked out of the dispatch center, I realized that my transformation from Sarah Mitchell to Agent Johnson was about to face its ultimate test. The skills I developed as a dispatcher, pattern recognition, crisis management, and understanding human behavior under pressure, would now be used to protect the very community where I'd learned them. Tomorrow would determine whether a small-town dispatcher could truly become the federal agent she'd never imagined possible. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.